Hello, beautiful soul. In this video, I want to share how I glowed up from the inside out and lost 32 kilos in the process. So I used to think that weight loss was the goal. If I could just stick to healthy habits and stay disciplined and reach a goal weight and maintain that, I would be free and everything would be solved. I would just achieve that goal and then I'd be able to maintain it and everything would be fine. And I would set goals. I would achieve weight loss goals. I would glow up with an emphasis on the external. And life would happen, triggers would happen, stress would happen, and this would often result in me reverting back to my old habits and my old weight or my old, poor lifestyle choices. So this happened pretty much my whole adult life. And the last time I gained a lot of weight as a result of burnout, it was 30 kilos. And I knew that I didn't want to keep repeating these cycles, these cyclical patterns of yo-yo dieting and restrictive eating and things that made me feel like a failure when I couldn't maintain them. Because the thing was, I was failing because I wasn't getting to the root core reasoning for my behaviors, for my stress, for my triggers, my thinking, my beliefs, all of that wasn't being addressed. So the last time I lost the weight, and hopefully the last time I'll ever fall into those negative patterns again, I decided to go right to the root, no more quick fixes, and address things systematically from the deepest part of myself. So hopefully this would be a sustainable change. And so here are 10 steps that I took to actually glow up from the inside out. So the first one was mindfulness. So my life prior to this was always chaos. There was always 100 things going on. I was in toxic situations. I was surrounded by stress and deadlines and unrealistic expectations of myself. And that often meant that I didn't have space or didn't create the space to actually tune in with myself, to watch my mind, to understand what was going on mentally for me and emotionally. So the first step was mindfulness. So creating space in my day to meditate, to start to cultivate this being able to watch my mind and watch my thoughts and be in tune and catch myself when a trigger happened, when a negative thought happened, the thing that happens before the behavior basically. And so that was a really important first step. The second thing I did was started to learn how to feel my emotions instead of numbing them. So this was a pattern of behavior that I realized that was really holding me back in a number of areas of my life. And that was actually numbing behaviors like emotional eating, like excessive binge watching of TV, like creating chaos in my life and busyness so that I wouldn't sit with my emotions. So really creating space and creating healthier outlets to process my emotions became essential. So that meant the mindfulness practices, journaling, creating space to actually feel an emotion when I felt an emotion. Instead of suppressing it and thinking I'll deal with that later, it's not a convenient time for me to cry or to feel that, or I don't want to be angry because that's toxic, or whatever stories I was telling myself, I created a space, usually through journaling, sometimes talking it through with a therapist as well, to process my emotions, to get my emotions out in a healthy way instead of reverting back to those unhealthy habits. So this was a really, really important thing to do. So the third thing I did was understanding and working on healing the root causes for my behaviors around health well-being. And these ultimately came back to childhood wounds. So my behaviors around people-pleasing, around self-abandonment, these were survival strategies. They weren't necessarily flaws, and having an understanding about that, about where that came from, was imperative. And so my understanding came from, I had a lack of self-worth, I had fears around rejection, fears around abandonment, and that actually resulted in people-pleasing behaviors, self-abandonment for other people, other things. And cultivating self-worth, self-love, working with my inner child, healing myself, loving myself unconditionally were a really key part of this whole thing. Because when we love ourselves, when we have good self-worth, we don't abandon ourselves. We prioritize our health. We prioritize our well-being because we know that if our cup's full, we can overflow into others. And so this was the most essential part, I think, of this whole thing that removed any guilt for looking after myself. So the fourth thing I did was coming to terms with and seeking a diagnosis for neurodivergence. So something that I noticed and something that definitely was impacting on my ability to look after myself, on my ability to nourish myself properly and make sure that my body was getting everything that it needed and my mind, was this hyperfocus issue that was happening. So my ADHD resulted in hyperfocus where I would just be sitting there for 3 to 4 hours, not moving, not eating, not drinking, not doing anything healthy, just working, realizing I've just survived on coffee and been fasting all day and I've forgotten to eat. And then at the end of the day, being exhausted, dehydrated, and eating whatever was in sight. So that getting a diagnosis and that awareness of how my neurodivergence was impacting on things was imperative. And so that awareness changed everything. So I was able to actually build things into my routine, into my day, to be able to combat that, to help me pause, help me reflect or check in with my body. And that looked like scheduling in 3 check-ins on my phone. A notification would come up that would remind me to do this, to check in with my body, mind. Did I need anything emotionally, physically, mentally? And that just became a habit over time, where initially it had to be a phone notification, but now I'm actually just doing that throughout the day and I don't need that notification, but having something structured and in place to help with that was really, really helpful. So the fifth thing that I did was undertake an energetic audit and set boundaries in place where required. So that meant tuning in and having a look at who or what around me was actually draining me and who or what around me actually energized me and made me feel good. This was essential. So I started to realize that when I was in periods of high stress because of a job, for example, this also applied to people. So people that created unnecessary conflict. Like, I don't avoid conflict. I'm fine with conflict, but for me, it needs to be healthy conflict. It needs to be constructive. I don't really like people that just want drama or cause drama, because that's just stressful for everyone. And there were people in my life like that who fed on drama. Like, I'm sure everyone's, been involved or exposed to people like this. And that was through work. That was some of my friendships. That was some of my family. I really had a look at these dynamics and the impact on my stress levels. And when my stress levels were impacting me, that resulted in negative behaviors around how I was coping. And there's also physiological reasons for this as well. So when we're in fight or flight, our body responds, all these adrenaline happens and all these other things happen within our body to kind of get us through that fight or flight. And then when we're out of that particular situation, our body is so depleted and mine would just go into this state of craving sugar or craving carbs. Like, it was actually really, really damaging to be exposing myself unnecessarily to toxic people and toxic places and toxic dynamics. So understanding those things, removing them completely where I could, that meant leaving a job, that meant ending friendships and letting go of things just for my own peace and for my own well-being. And we shouldn't actually feel guilty about doing this, because when we're depleted, when we're stressed, when we're not in a good state, that's not good for anyone around us either. So it benefits everyone for us to be healthy, for us to be well, for us to be energized. And so this one's really important. And where I couldn't let go of people or things or places, I put boundaries in place. That meant limiting contact with certain dynamics or people or situations. The sixth thing I addressed and looked at was nutrition and focus on intuitive eating. So pretty much my whole adult life, I was always quite restrictive around my food choices and fully cut out entire food groups and things like this. I went on restrictive calorie diets and fad diets and all these kinds of things, and they would get short-term results. I would often be able to stick to these diets and be really determined and achieve a weight goal, for example. However, transitioning from that into eating more normal food was always a real challenge. And then life would happen and stress would happen and the weight would come back on, and it wasn't sustainable. And so I knew I had to change this. And I went back to treating food as something that nourished my body. So looking at whole foods, cooking at home, preparing my food with love and making sure that I was getting enough. So that didn't mean not calorie counting, because I did do that. However, it wasn't super low calories. I was eating probably double the amount of what I used to in the past, and emphasizing balanced meals. So protein, carbs, fats, making sure that everything had a lot of color, a lot of nutrients. These things are really important. It made me feel really good. So being on a weight loss journey when you're trying to be more mindful and nourishing your body and it's coming from a place of health is completely different than when you're trying to glow up and it's external only and your ultimate goal is weight loss. For me, it was about nourishing my body, like loving my body, giving my body what it needed. So I stopped fasting and I stopped skipping meals, because there's science now that really discourages women from doing fasting. And I found that when I actually implemented this into my life and tried it for myself, I have been able to feel a lot better not fasting. So waking up, eating within, 20 minutes, half an hour of getting up, what has been a life changer. And I honored my hunger cues. So tuning in with what was going on with my body and giving it what it needed. And sometimes that would mean a little bit more extra food, and that would be okay. Also, allowing space to indulge. So not being super restrictive. To be able to attend a social function and eat with other people and not feel guilty about it, and not think that, I've, eaten something unhealthy, my whole diet's over, and then allowing that to be a spiral downwards and to completely give up, which was my pattern of behavior before, where I was in more of a all or nothing mindset. It was about saying, okay, this is my life now. I'm choosing to live a healthy life. I'm choosing to show myself love. And that meant indulging without guilt or shame or any of those things. And then just getting back on track or just continuing on with a healthy choice the next time. And that has been the hugest thing that has made this sustainable on a long-term basis. And I think this is the key for it to be sustainable lifelong. And indulging with other people also doesn't mean eating when other people eat. Like, if I attend a social function, I will tune in with myself and say, do I feel like that actually? And if I don't, I won't eat anything. I'll attend things, I'll socialize, I will still participate without the pressure on myself to actually eat. And sometimes people will pressure me, like particularly in my family, which is Eastern European, like they love feeding people and eating food together is like a real thing. And I've had to have strong boundaries for myself and just stick to what I want to do in those moments, and just let people know that, no, I will participate, I'll talk to you, I'll be involved and engaged in this conversation, but I'm just going to eat what I want to eat, or I'm just not going to eat at all. So part of the nutrition thing as well, and that intersection with being neurodivergent and having ADHD, is those issues around impulse control. And so that was something I really struggled with when I was younger. So thinking without acting, not thinking things through, and then potentially regretting hasty actions or impulsive decisions afterwards. So slowing down doing mindfulness, processing my emotions, making sure I was managing emotional triggers and things like that. Also eating throughout the day so I wasn't super starving prior to a social function, for example. All these things helped with impulse control. So now I don't make impulsive decisions. I don't react. I don't do anything hasty. And it's all been around slowing down, thinking things through, like creating space between what I want to do and the action that I'm doing has been super important. And it's really helped doing all these other steps, the inner work, when it came to addressing nutrition and food and things like that. So the seventh thing I did was addressed my gut health. So I took probiotics. I was making sure that I was eating 30 different plants a week, doing all these things to improve gut microbiome and limiting those things that would upset my gut microbiome. So I don't really partake in anything toxic anymore. I don't drink alcohol. I don't eat a bunch of processed foods. Stress was another really huge one when it came to my gut health. And so really working on that, getting rid of stressors, managing my emotions around stress, dealing with stress in an appropriate way was really essential for my gut health and recovery in terms of that, because that affects other things. It affects our mood, it affects our nervous system, all of those things. So addressing gut health was really important. The next thing on the list, and number 8, was working on sleep. So making sure that I was allowing adequate time for sleep, emphasizing like a sleep routine was really important too. So winding down at a certain time, trying to get to bed at 10 o'clock every night, things like this, creating an environment that was conducive to sleep, so tidy, the right temperature, making sure it was dark. All of these things really helped. And I also took and I continue to take supplements for that. So I'm taking melatonin for that, which has been really helpful too. So the next thing on my list that I addressed was exercise. And exercise is something I've always really enjoyed and always been into. However, when I was on these external glow up journeys where I wanted to lose weight, it would become sort of a punishment and something I forced myself to do sometimes. So I would overindulge potentially, and then in food or whatever, and then really try and punish myself to work extra hard to burn off those calories in the gym. So there was, this kind of punitive side to the way that I exercised. However, this internal glow up meant that I treated exercise in a different way. I thought of it in a different way. So it was more about doing something that was healthy for my body. And when I put on 30 kilos, like it was not realistic for me to be able to jump straight back into the exercise I was doing prior, like high intensity cardio and stuff like that. So I had to start small. And so I started with walking in nature, walking my dog, increasing that to harder and harder walks and hikes, for example. Then when I was okay with that, I would do short workouts, and I started with YouTube workouts like Caroline Govan, and I think Fitness Marshall is the dance guy. So doing these kinds of videos to build up with a kettlebell or body weight or whatever. And then I got a gym membership and started slow with that. So things that I could do, which were at the beginning, yoga, Pilates, abs butt size, things like that. Then I increased from there to weights, to cardio, to high intensity interval training, stuff like that. So working my way up. Also having hobbies that incorporated exercise and addressed multiple things. So for me, that's hiking. So hiking for me addresses a number of things. It is about mental health, physical health. It connects us with people. It's, I think, been a really healthy hobby and a healthy outlet for me. So working on that and slowly building up to be able to do multiple days carrying a lot of things on my back, etc. And the things that I continue to do are I walk my dog every day. I go to the gym every day. I do multi-day hikes in between that, or day hikes. I do dancing. I do dancing workouts and things like this. I do yoga. occasionally as well. So just incorporating any type of movement during the day, making sure that I was moving every day. I tracked my movement as well with a smartwatch just to see like how I'm tracking, how I'm going, how many calories am I burning, so that I could not increase the deficit, but make sure that I wasn't under eating, that I was maintaining a good balance between my movement and my exercise and my expenditure of calories and what I was putting back in. So the 10th and final thing that I did in terms of glowing up from the inside out was really embracing this growth mindset and personal development journey. So looking at my life and not looking at the past failures or things that I had done diet-wise that didn't work. It was really about being in the present moment and looking at the future life that I wanted, which was a healthy, sustainable, peaceful life where I could live well, I could thrive and have enough energy and confidence to be able to do the things I wanted to do, and really focusing on that. So I know that this is a huge topic and I know it can be really challenging, and I've definitely felt these things before, like the failures and the disappointments, and just trying to get the right balance for ourselves and our bodies and learning what works for us. But if we go deeper, if we do the inner work, if we glow up from the inside out at the deepest core of ourselves and love ourselves and heal ourselves and understand that everything we do can be from a place of love, can be from a place of, self-worth and wanting the best for ourselves and the most opportunities for ourselves, and for us to be living the best possible life we can, and working on that first and doing that work at the front end, everything else will fall into place and the weight will come off eventually. And instead of seeking external validation or glowing up so that other people can validate us and love us and treat us in a certain way, it's about wanting what's best for us and giving ourselves what we know we deserve. So I hope this has helped someone. I love you. Bye.